Is it a good thing or a bad thing when your latest episode of the Book of Boba Fett is far better than any episode that's come before, or on par with the best episode of the series thus far, but yet not containing any of your main characters from that series? Yeah, so this is Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, The Return of the Mandalorian. So yeah, the title says it all for this episode. This episode is a side episode, shall we say. It catches up with the Mandalorian and what's happened with him. The episode opens with a great scene of Mando going to this meat market, this Wuhan meat market, shall we say, where he's after a bounty. Obviously he gets into a fight, he dispatches of all the people, including the individual that he's after, with the use of the dark saber, and it slices through people like a hot knife through butter, shall we say. It's quite a violent scene in that sense, but very well executed. The show then jumps to this city in space, shall we call it, which is almost like a ring shape, and you know, you get to see how the sun works around it, lighting it up from day to night, this sort of thing. Wonderful stuff that we haven't seen in Star Wars before. Yeah, and that's really good. And in this segment of the episode, we meet up with the armourer, the Mandalorian armourer that we were introduced to in way back in The Mandalorian. And only 3 Mandalorians had survived that attack that we witnessed before, and they've set up here. Now, Mando himself had got injured in the initial fight, and he gets surgery done, or shall we say, he gets first aid to repair this injury to his leg. The injury came from his use of the dark saber, which he ain't too skilled in its use. He gets a bit of training by the armourer on its use, and then gets into a duel with the other Mandalorian warrior that's there that we've met before in Mando, and they fight for the dark saber because he wants it. Obviously Mando himself wins, but the armourer asks if either of them have ever taken their helmet off, to which Mando replies that he has. And she basically casts him out of this sect of Mandalorians. Before this happens, she asks about the staff that he's got, made of Beskar steel, that he picked up in The Mandalorian. She says that Beskar steel's not used for weapons, it's only used for armour. So he lets her melt it down, and he has something made for Grogu, because he plans to go and see Grogu again. He asks for something to be made for a youngling, because he sees Grogu as being a youngling of the Mandalorian. Yeah, so then Mando himself, he boards a public liner, you know, like a bus in space, shall we say, which takes him to Tatooine. Now, as soon as we got back to Tatooine, I was like, oh, okay, Tatooine again. But we got to Tatooine, he goes and sees the woman, I can't remember her name, who fixed his ship before, and she's got a new vessel for him, and it's a Republic starfighter. The little thing that Annie, shall we say, used in the Phantom Menace. Yeah, the little yellow starfighter, you know, the Queen's Amidala's ships, those little starfighters that they had there, and they retrofit it, they add new parts to it and this sort of thing, and make it all silver, and this becomes Mando's new vessel. He takes it for a spin, he takes it down Beggar's Canyon, in a scene reminiscent of the old pod race scene from Phantom Menace and this sort of thing. Then he takes it up into space to try it out, where, again, reminiscent to Mandalorian before, he gets pursued by 2 X-Wing fighters that come up alongside him, and yeah, and one of them is the same pilot as what we introduced to before, the one who gave Cara Dune the thing in that episode that we saw before in The Mandalorian. A lot of Mandalorian. How many times I've said Mandalorian in this review? Anyway, I don't know, but Mandalorian, there we go, I'll say it again. Yeah, so and he sort of shoots off, and then I said that no one else is in it from Boba Fett, but Fennec turns up, like we saw at the end of the last episode of Boba Fett, going after some muscle, and she asks to recruit him. He says he'll do it on the house for Boba, but before he does that, he's got to go and see a little friend, and the episode cuts off there. So we were given this great scene earlier in this episode where we had a flashback to the destruction of Mandalore itself and what they went through. This is a scene where Mando was recounting his fight with Moff Gideon to the armourer, and she talks about how Mandalore was destroyed, and you get this fantastic looking scene with these TIE bombers, you know, dropping bombs, and these big sort of mushroom clouds coming up and this sort of a thing. It looks really fantastic, well crafted, you know, and then you saw a scene on the ground in flames, and you had droids coming through, these sort of battle droids, you know, and very reminiscent of the Terminator, shall we say. Yeah, reminded me of those shots of the future war in Terminator, this sort of thing. And you're sort of thinking, I want to see that. I want to see more of that, of what they went through there. So hopefully, you know, they will do more of that in upcoming seasons of The Mandalorian. I'd really like those sort of flashbacks to see the struggles that they went through on the planet. But this episode overall, again, a fantastic episode, but for the wrong reasons, because it's not Boba Fett. It's not an episode of Boba Fett. This is an episode of The Mandalorian that pretty much sets up the you know, where he's at, what's happened to him, so we can go straight into the next seasons of The Mandalorian with his new ship and all this sort of stuff. And you know, we don't have to deal with this stuff in The Mandalorian. So, like I said, but again, people will say this is the best episode of the of Boba Fett, sorry, without knowing why they think it's the best episode. And the reason it's the best episode is because it gets, for the majority of it, or for half of it, it gets away from Tatooine. It gives us parts of the Star Wars universe with this you know, this sort of ring-shaped city in space that we've not seen before, even if it's just very brief and this sort of thing, and then the flashbacks to Mandalore itself. So the reasons being is you know, it's that simple, really. And not only that, even Mando himself, he's still, even though you've seen him off with the mask off and this sort of thing, there's still an air of mystery about this character, you know, and coolness about him, the way he carries himself and this sort of thing. And this has been lost from Boba Fett himself. Boba Fett is a character you now know. It's not you know, not the story of Boba Fett you'd have ever wanted, and thusly that coolness has sort of drifted onto Mando himself. The coolness that Boba Fett once was is alive in Mando and not in Boba Fett. But no, a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed it, but like I said, just for the wrong reasons. But yeah, so this will go down as probably my favourite episode of Boba Fett thus far. Maybe even better than the one where he's in that 50-minute episode where he's with the Tusken Raiders. This episode did run at about 46 minutes, not including the lengthy titles at the end, or 47 minutes, something like that. But yeah, no, fantastic. Happy to see Mando back. Happy to see what's happened to him, and can't wait for next week to see how this plays out. Brilliant stuff. Thank you for watching. This is AJ. Please consider hitting the subscribe button and all them other buttons, and I'll see you next time. Take care all, and goodbye.